Hi everyone, Nigel Saunders here. Today I'm going to be working on my Northern Bog forest. This forest is a mixture of larch trees and black spruce. This forest used to have a layer of moss on the forest floor, but it was getting too thick and it was full of weeds, so I stripped all the moss off. And yesterday I spent about 2 hours weeding the forest. It was full of Irish moss and all kinds of weeds in here. So it's all nice and clean, the landscape now, so I'm going to reapply a layer of moss to it. I try and keep my moss as long as possible on the forest floor, but the original layer of moss was just getting too full of weeds and liverwort, and it just was getting very thick. You can prune it back with scissors, but it was just kind of beyond saving. So I stripped it all off, and yesterday I collected moss. And I try and always collect more moss than I think I'll need, and I always tend to end up with about half of what I need. You need a lot of moss for a forest like this. So I'll start to apply the moss today. Now the moss I collected, it may have weeds in it. I try and pick moss that doesn't have weeds in it, but you know, there could be seeds and everything in it. So I may have to do some weeding as the moss gets established. It's part of the regular maintenance of a forest. So here I go applying the moss. So this is the moss I collected, and you can see there's a layer of mud underneath it. But that's okay. It helps the moss keep its humidity, kind of an organic layer on top. So I just press it down, and if the moss is too dry, you need to soak it. But we had some pretty heavy rain the last few days, so this moss is quite moist, and I just press it into the bonsai soil like that, making sure there's good contact for the entire patch of moss. You really have to kind of squish it into the soil. Just like that. So I'll continue applying the moss, just piecing it together like a jigsaw puzzle, going in around the trees and the roots. And you'll find once this moss gets regular water and fertilizer that it greens up very quickly. And it'll need, trimming with scissors every once in a while to keep it to size and miniature looking. It also helps to water the moss and make sure it's really soaked, and then you can press it down once again, ensuring good contact with the soil, like that. I'll continue mossing up the forest, and then we'll come back and have a look at it. I used up all my moss, and I'm only about halfway mossing the forest, but you can see the difference. How it makes it look more lush and miniature looking. Yeah, it really makes a difference mossing up a forest. So I've got like the front half done, and I have to come in and moss up all around the back here. So I'll have to go out and collect some more moss, but yeah, the forest is looking quite realistic. There's a few trees I'll need to trim up today. There's a few long shoots that are extending. But yeah, it's makes a big difference mossing it up. It's quite a transformation, I think. So off I go to collect more moss. I've collected some more moss. It's not quite as green as the moss I had out front, but it'll green up quite nicely. So you can see the patches I got there. I think that'll be enough to fill in the back, so I'll work away mossing up the back of the forest. I have finished mossing up the forest. It looks quite different. It looks very lush and miniature looking now. So my next step, I've got to water the planting thoroughly and then push the moss down once again, making sure it's really firmly pushed into the soil. And then after that, it's just a matter of managing the weeds and keeping the moss trim. All right, here I go with the watering. And this water is rainwater, and it has a little bit of fertilizer mixed in, a very small amount. And I just, use a small amount of fertilizer every time I water, and that seems to keep the trees happy. So I'm giving it a good soaking. And this moss will help retain a bit of moisture in the soil. All the trees in this forest are water-loving trees, the larch and the black spruce. So you can water them quite heavily and fertilize them, and they'll like it. They like lots of humidity, water, and fertilizer. Okay, so that should do it. So now I'll come in and just make sure all the moss is pushed down nicely. Making sure there's no air spaces underneath the moss. Okay. So my next step is to do a little trimming of the trees. I've said it before, but this forest I can really relate to. It really gives me the feeling of being in a northern forest. These are the type of trees that I see in this area and further up north, and yeah, it really takes me away to, it feels like you're in a actual forest up north, and the trees are very relatable to me. Some of those kind of twisty, contorted trees, I can't relate to them because I don't see those kind of trees in my area. So this is a forest that I guess gives me a lot of pleasure to look at. In this forest, I have a lot of newly planted trees that aren't developed very well, and it kind of spoils the scale of the planting a bit, but they'll eventually develop to look like the other trees, the tall conical form. It's just a matter of time before they catch up to the other trees. So I'm going to do a little pruning today. You can see there's a few shoots that are sticking out here that I'll prune back. Just tidying up the trees. And on these larch, you get 3 or sometimes 4 growth spurts per season. So you can develop the trees quite quickly, getting a lot of ramification, and then once they get full like this, you end up doing a lot of thinning because they are quite vigorous growers. So this tree is a new tree, and I can't do a lot. I can prune off, I can prune back these vertical growth a bit. I don't want to touch too many of the lower branches. Just making sure they're not tangled here. And I like keeping the lower branches on these trees. It makes a more realistic forest. In a lot of forests you see, the branches of the tree go almost right down to the ground, especially in a dense forest. Now, not all the trees have that style. Some have exposed trunks, but it's good to have a bit of variety in the forest, and it creates that realistic feeling. So here's a new larch that I can prune the tips back on. Again, just to keep it more compact. You can see I have multiple leaders coming up here, so I'll keep this one and prune this one back. This is a new spruce here, and I can't do a whole lot. I can, it's got multiple leaders coming up in the apex here. I could prune the tips off these ones to kind of encourage a bit of back budding. Trying to achieve that conical form someday with them. And you can see last time I pruned these trees, I used the blue scissors and I just sheared them to a conical form, and there's some browning at the tips of the needles, but not a whole lot. it's not too distracting. I think this tree, I can't use this as the apex, it's a bit too far off. So I'll develop another shoot up the middle of the tree eventually. Some of these black spruce can use a bit of a prune. Move this vertical shoot, trim these ones back a bit. Yeah, just anything that's getting a little too long and out of shape. This one can go right off. It's a vertical shoot. And there's a fine line between growth and pruning. Trees do have to grow to gain vigor. So if you're always pruning that new growth back, you'll get a weaker tree. So you've got to find a balance between refinement and development. I'm just pruning some of these longer tips back. They're not too far out of shape at the moment, but all these shoots will continue to extend and grow. So it's a good idea to just tip them at least. And you can do it by pinching also, but I find it easier just to come in with the scissors and prune them back. And I'm trying to maintain space between the trees. So anything kind of growing in towards the next tree beside it gets pruned back. These are new trees back here also, so they're a little wild looking, some of them. But they're getting there. They're getting that conical form already. This one was terrible. It wasn't conical at all. So I did quite a bit of shearing on it, and it's improving. And that's all you can ask for, is a little improvement every year. There's a lot of shoots growing out towards each other on these trees that I need to nip back. Always maintaining that space between the trees, otherwise all these branches will die back. Yeah, so no radical pruning today or anything. It's just a matter of basically pinching the tips, the growing tips. That's looking better. I really enjoyed working on the bog forest today. It's looking really nice, I think. So let's fly in and have a last look at the forest. My 3 large forests are all in fairly good shape now. They've all been pruned up. The larch forest is a little fluffy looking. It needs some needle plucking and thinning. The bog forest is looking good, and the Avatar Grove is also doing really well. This forest is a very young forest still. I think it's going to its 5th growing season. And most of the trees were started from those mail order seedlings you can buy. The club ordered in a bunch, and I got some from John, the Black Spruce, and some of the Larch. And so they're nothing special. They're not old collected trees or anything. So in the playlist you can see the entire creation of this forest and all the maintenance I've done to it and how it's changed over the years. So that is all for today. I'm Nigel Saunders. Thanks for joining me in the Bonsai Zone.